reflections on the Srimad Bhagavatam to be part of your regular daily discussion on this wonderful, most wonderful of all sacred texts. So generally we will be discussing, as per tradition, we'll discuss a single verse and read the translation, the Sanskrit, the translation, and the commentary, and offer some reflections there. So I will chant the Sanskrit. I don't think we'll get repetition. Is that your sense?
No repetition. We just go briefly through the verse.
Anand Bihari Prabhu. Okay. So, Atainam Astod Avadharya Purusham Padam Natanga Kritadi Kritanjali Svarochi Sabharata Sotika Graham Virochayantam Gatabi Prabhavavit. Translation. So just to say to all of you, I'm joining you from Cyprus, so your early morning here. We're just here in the afternoon already. So this verse, a very beautiful verse. O Maharaj Parikshit, descendant of King Bharata, Vasudeva, that's Krishna's father, could understand that this child was the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Narayana. Having concluded this without a doubt, he became fearless. Bowing down with folded hands and concentrating his attention, he began to offer prayers to the child, who illuminated his birthplace by his natural effulgence. And then we have a very short commentary here. Struck with wonder, with great wonder, Vasudeva now concentrated his attention on the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Understanding the influence of the Supreme Lord, he was surely fearless, since he understood that the Lord had appeared to give him protection. Gatabi, Prabhavavit. These are two really important words, so I'm going to come back to these as we discuss today. Gatabi and Prabhavavit, you can note those. Understanding that the Supreme Personality of Godhead was present, he appropriately offered prayers as follows. And we will not be discussing as follows today. That'll be for the speaker tomorrow for your class, for the follow-up class. Today we'll focus on what we've read here. Vasudeva. So let's stop the share so that I can see you, or at least see your names, your holy names, as I offer some reflections on this verse. So what I would extract from this verse are four essential points. One is the effect of not knowing that Krishna is the Supreme Lord. That's the initial state that is inferred. That is ignorance of Krishna. It has some particular effect. And then there is a different effect from knowing about Krishna. And this, what is the quality, what does it mean to know? It actually means to experience Krishna. And then it leads to something, a desire to serve. So I'm going to discuss four topics with you today then from this verse that we've read. One is the effects of ignorance of Krishna. Second, that knowledge of Krishna is to experience him. It's not just intellectual. A third would be the effects of this experience. And then the fourth would be what you're going to do with it, what it would lead to. And all of these 4 points are extracted from this verse that we have just read. So let's unpack it. First, the effects of ignorance of Krishna. So I told you, I pointed out a phrase there, Gatabhi. It means that Vasudeva, Krishna's father, that his fear went away. That means he was in a state of fear initially. Why was he in a state of fear? Yeah. Why was he afraid? Well, where is he? He's in a prison, right? And all of his children have been killed by his brother-in-law, Kamsa. And so he's afraid. Ananda Bihari told me that you have been discussing these verses and you've been getting the background. So I won't go into the background, but he's afraid. And this last child has been born. And what will happen now when his brother-in-law hears this child's cry? Will the same thing happen as has happened to the 7 previous, or the 6 earlier children? So he's afraid. And so we can take this also metaphorically. What is the effect of not knowing God? Not having knowledge of God, it can produce, ignorance can produce, well, confusion, doubt, fear. If we can't see when it's dark and you're stumbling in the dark, then we can also be afraid because we don't know what our next step will lead us to. So there's fear, there's fright, there's confusion, there's doubt. And so Patanjali, in his Yoga Sutras, he describes, in fact, 4 daughters of ignorance, of avidya. So vidya, knowledge, avidya, ignorance. So avidya has 4 children. One is ahankara, false identification or false ego. This we could also say confusion as to who I am. Another is that we get false attachment, raga, and aversion, so that is dvesha. And finally, abhinivesha, fear of death, fear of birth, fear of the soul is eternal. But Patanjali is saying when we are ignorant of our true nature, we're ignorant of God, then we experience this fear. So you've been studying Bhagavatam. There's a nice story of Brahma. His initial awakening or awareness of self is an initial state of, we could say, ignorance. We learn in the 2nd and 3rd cantos of the Bhagavatam, Brahma. And I think of this as, I take this as a story of the every soul. Brahma, when we initially meet him, he's sitting on a lotus flower, and he doesn't know who he is, he doesn't know where he is, he doesn't know what he's supposed to do. Who can relate to that? I'm guessing we can all relate at some level. At some point in life, we become self-aware. For me, it happened, I think, at around 4. I kind of woke up, and I think that's my earliest memories.
You found yourself sitting on a lotus flower at age 4?
Not on a lotus flower. In Wellington, New Zealand somewhere. But I'm guessing, yeah, for most of us, 3, 4, 5, that's probably as far as back as our earliest memories go. And so Brahma, he has this awareness of self. He doesn't know who he is, where he is. And so he, in this confusion, he makes an effort through empirical experience to understand who he is by climbing down the lotus stem. And this lotus stem covers the expanse of the universe. So the 14 planetary systems are said to exist in the lotus stem that Brahma climbs down, trying to find his origin. Who am I? Where have I come from? And this takes him to the water that is in the at the bottom of the universe, in the navel of Garbhodakashayi Vishnu. And he's not able to proceed further. And so he's still confused, even though he's searched the expanse of the universe, he still doesn't know who he is or where he's come from. But then he receives some guidance, and it is tapa. Ta and pa, 2 syllables, go within to meditate. And so he climbs back up the lotus stem, which is basically Satyaloka, the highest planet in the universe and the lowest Patala Lokas. He's covered the entire universe in his journey to search, who am I? Now he understands I need to meditate. And so he meditates, and then from within his heart, he receives illumination. Krishna illuminates him with knowledge, with vidya, Brahma Vidya, knowledge as to who he is, who God is, what is this world, what is the purpose of this world. And he's enlightened. And so Brahma here is an example for all of us. We are initially in a state of ignorance, and we can search for knowledge, and we can search everywhere for that knowledge in a state of confusion. Hopefully, if we're fortunate, we will also, like Brahma, take to a sadhana, a practice of service. And then we can be illuminated by Krishna, the descending knowledge, that the knowledge that is given to us. And so let's pause here for some sadhana notes then. When we experience doubt or fear, it could be an indication of that ignorance of our true nature. When we seek out spiritual knowledge, this is the beginning of human life, actually. When we become aware and we start to search for knowledge. And then the third is that this knowledge can't be had by our own efforts. It's given to us. It's revealed. It's a gift that we receive. So what is the knowledge that then Vasudeva has received that has made him fearless? He sees his child, and he sees his child as Purusha Param. That's the Sanskrit word that's used there. Purusha Param. He's the supreme being. He's the supreme person, the topmost being. So this knowledge is not just information. Google has information. Google has lots and lots of information, but Google is not enlightened. Google is just a repository of so much information. What is it to have knowledge then? Knowledge is that when that information is realized. So some Sanskrit words that appear in this verse are avadharya, that is to know, to perceive, to realize. And then there was that other phrase that I asked you to take note of when we read the verse, prabhava vit. Vit is a Sanskrit word, and in English we have wit. Wit, what does it mean to be witty? To be very clever, to be good with words and wordplay and to have quick responses. Yeah. So vit is a Sanskrit word. And wit in English, wisdom comes from wit. And then Veda, wisdom, Veda, vit, these are all related. And so Prabhava Vit, Vasudeva, he saw, he experienced, he realized God's greatness, this Purusha Param that he saw, and he understood, he realized, he beheld the greatness of this. He's not just a child, this is God. I don't need to be afraid. So to be knowledgeable then, from the perspective of yoga, of the Bhagavatam, is not just intellectual, not just an intellectual exercise. It's more than information gathering. It's to be cognitive of God and God's greatness. It's to be moved at the level of the heart. Vasudeva, Krishna's father's heart, has been moved because he's experiencing this child as Purusha Param, as God. And he's seeing with his own eyes and identifying him. This is the Purusha described in the Vedas. This is the God Almighty who's described in the Vedas. And here I am perceiving him with my own eyes. I am beholding him. And his heart shifts from fear to faith. And that's knowledge. So not just intellectual, but a shifting of the heart, a moving of the heart. where he's feeling something. He's feeling fearless. He's feeling God's grace. There's a beautiful story that's told in the biography of Sri Chaitanya called Chaitanya Charitamrita, where during his travels in South India, Sri Chaitanya comes to a place called Ranga Kshetra. It's near to Mysore. Mysore, a popular place for yoga. Iyengar and Patabi Joyce, they were all there in Mysore. So just next to Mysore is Ranga Kshetra, where Chaitanya Mahaprabhu went to a temple, and he saw a Brahmana reading Bhagavad Gita. And this Brahmana, like me when I chanted the verse earlier, he didn't really pronounce the Sanskrit that well. Kind of, stumbled on the Sanskrit, and he was in the company of other Brahmanas who were very expert at their Sanskrit pronunciation and repetition of the Vedas, and so they were laughing at him. They were mocking him. But Lord Chaitanya saw that this Brahmana was very happy. He had signs in his body of ecstasy, of joyfulness. And so Chaitanya asked him, and this also shows Lord Chaitanya's expertise. He's a connoisseur of the nectar of the Bhagavad Gita. And so he asks this Brahmana, tell me, which section of the Bhagavad Gita is giving you so much pleasure? He wants to know. If you're reading the Bhagavad Gita and then you see someone else is like reading and they're laughing and their hair is standing on end and they're experiencing so much joy, then you might say, hey, what are you reading? And so Lord Chaitanya has become curious. Which section of the Bhagavad Gita are you reading that's giving you so much joy? And the Brahmana's response was quite astonishing. He said, actually, I don't know how to read. And I don't really understand Sanskrit. Sometimes I read the Bhagavad Gita correctly, sometimes I read incorrectly, so why do I do it? He says, because my guru told me to. This was my guru's instruction to me, read Bhagavad Gita every day. And so I come here and I read the Bhagavad Gita and I experience great joy. Particularly, he said, what I see when I read the Bhagavad Gita is Krishna sitting on the chariot as the charioteer of Arjuna, holding the reins of his devotee's chariot. And when I see that vision, when I behold that vision that is given to me by the Bhagavad Gita, I become ecstatic. Thinking how Krishna, reflecting on how Krishna has become the servant of his devotee. And he's guiding his devotee. He's driving the chariot of his devotee. That fills me with great happiness. And as long as I read the Bhagavad Gita and I have this vision, my mind can't be distracted from anything other than this. And so Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he gave that Brahmana a very tight embrace. And he said, you are the real knower of the Bhagavad Gita. Whatever you know, that constitutes the real purport of the Bhagavad Gita. And so from this story of Lord Chaitanya and the Brahmana, but also the story that we're discussing today of Vasudeva beholding his son as Param Purusha, as the Supreme Lord, and his heart being moved from fear to faith. That shows us that knowledge is more than mere intellectual exercise. It is to behold and experience God. We don't just read the scriptures to listen or listen to lectures for knowledge as information gathering. but we practice it as a sadhana. Not to say we have completed a quota of chanting so many rounds or reading so many pages or distributing so many books, whatever the case may be, but we practice a sadhana for Krishna's pleasure as service. And when we do, and we experience Krishna, we experience grace in our life. So this is a practical thing. It's not just intellectual. In the Gita, Krishna tells Arjuna, this knowledge, Raja Vidya, it is the king, Raja Vidya. And he says, Raja Guhya, it is a king of secrets. The king of knowledge and the king of secrets. And it is pavitra, it is pure. But then he says something very, very pertinent to our discussion here. He says, Pratyaksha Vagamam, you will experience it. You won't just know it, but you will experience it tangibly. What is that experience? The moving of the heart, the shifting of the heart. It is to experience peace. It is to experience happiness. Krishna specifically mentions in the verse, Susukam. You will experience a very pure and auspicious type of happiness. So that can lead us to our third topic then, the effects of experiencing God. Beyond the intellectual plane, Arjuna asks Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita, what is knowledge? Very nice question, very pertinent question. Bhagavad Gita, chapter 8, text 1. What is knowledge? And then Krishna responds in verses 8 to 12 by describing 20 qualities of character. What is knowledge? And Krishna says humility, non-violence, tolerance, simplicity, cleanliness. No, I ask, what is knowledge? What you're describing are character traits. Krishna lists 20 of these qualities and he says, that is knowledge. In other words, knowledge is not just knowing, but it is transformation. It is a change of heart. We have knowledge of God. When we behold God, we become humble. We become steady. We become self-controlled. We become detached from the material nature. So peacefulness, fearlessness, that's what Vasudeva has experienced. He's beheld the Supreme Lord and he's become fearless. In the 5th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, text 29, Krishna describes Gyatva mam shantim richati. Gyatva also like jnana, to know. Gyatva mam, one who knows me. Shantim will experience peace. Om shanti, shanti, shanti. How do we get that shanti, that peace? Krishna is saying here, by knowing me. Gyatva mam shantim richati. You will experience peace in knowing me. Elsewhere, he says in the 9th chapter, he says, if you know, 4th chapter, verse 9. He says, if you know that my birth and activities are divya, are divine, you'll be liberated. Tyaktva punar janma naiti. You will not take birth again in the material nature. If you truly know me, that my birth and my activities in this world are of a transcendental nature. So Krishna is telling us then, if you know me, you will have peace. If you know me, you'll be liberated. If you know me, you will be happy. These are the effects of knowledge of me. What are some examples? Like what are the examples of Krishna's claims? Krishna's made some claims here. Do we have any evidences to support Krishna's claims that these are the effects of beholding him, of knowing him? Yeah, the Bhagavatam gives the examples. The Bhagavad Gita gives the theology, and then in the Bhagavatam, that theology comes to life with examples. So one really powerful example is Chitraketu Maharaj. He was a great devotee, a great king, and then he made a joke. Have you ever told a joke and then it fell flat? The person that you told it to just didn't get it, or they became offended. They didn't appreciate the humor.
Yes.
Yeah, right. So I'm sure we've all experienced that. So Chitraketu Maharaj, he saw something that he thought was humorous. He made a joke of it, and he got into trouble. The joke was this, the experience, what he saw was this. Lord Shiva was sitting surrounded by many, many renunciant sages, sannyasis. They were all surrounding him, and Lord Shiva was at the center giving them instruction. But seated on Shiva's lap was his wife Parvati, and Shiva's arm was around her. So he was embracing her. He was embracing his wife with her seated on his lap as he was giving instruction to renunciant sages. And Chitraketu, he was flying overhead on his airplane, and he saw this and he thought it was kind of humorous. And so he made a comment, just see, all these sages listening to Lord Shiva, and he himself is sitting with his wife, with his consort on his lap as he embraces her. He saw some humor there, he commented on it, and but Shiva's wife, Shiva smiled. Shiva kind of got the joke, but Shiva's wife, Parvati, took it as an offense. You dare to offend, to criticize Lord Shiva? That wasn't his intention, but that was how Parvati took it. So she said, your mentality is like a demon, and so I curse you to become a demon. Okay, how is this devotee, Chitraketu, going to respond to this situation? How would you and I respond? I think we would go and put forth a defense. Sorry, I didn't mean it. I didn't mean it to be, I didn't want to offend anybody. I just saw some humor there and I commented. But flat joke means you're a demon. All right, yeah. So Chitraketu, there we are. So Chitraketu, he kind of just took it, all right, this is Krishna's arrangement. He just took it as a, actually he took it like this. He said, Parvati is concerned about my well-being. She's concerned that I've made a mistake in offending Lord Shiva. So he approached Parvati and said, thank you, mother. It is right that a mother will correct her children. And so you have corrected me, and that shows your care for me. And he left. And Lord Shiva turned to Parvati, to his wife, as Chitraketu left, and said, just see the character of these devotees. They see Chitraketu's equipoise. He's not disturbed. You took offense. He could have taken offense as well and counter-cursed or made a defense, but he's just taken, he has remained equipoised in the face of adversity. Yeah, the verse is very famous. Narayana para sarve na kutashtana bibhyati svarga pavarga narake apitulyata darshanam. Devotees of Krishna who are solely engaged in devotional service don't fear any condition in life. For them, heaven or hell are the same, because wherever they are, they will be seeing the Lord and they will be engaged in service. If they go to heaven, they will serve. If they go to hell, they will serve. And so they will always be feeling Krishna's protection. Most wonderful, profound description of the devotee that Lord Shiva provides here. The effect of knowing Krishna, the effect of beholding Krishna, is that the devotee is fearless and equipoised, as we see illustrated in the example of Chitraketu Maharaj. Another wonderful example, when I came online and I was introduced, Ananda Bihari introduced me as Prahlad, Sri Prahlad, and then asked me how I got the name. So Prahlad Maharaj was a 5-year-old boy. I joined the ashram when I was just turning 5. We moved into the ashram. My parents had been practicing at home even before I was born, but we moved into the ashram, to an ashram school when I was 5. And so they gave me that name, Prahlad. And Prahlad's example is that he was fearless in the face of so many challenging situations beyond what we can even imagine. His father was the greatest atheist, most powerful atheist who ever existed, according to the Bhagavatam. And when he discovered that his son was such a staunch devotee, a staunch bhakta, then he wanted to kill him. And he tried by so many means, with weapons, with poison, by crushing, by throwing him from the mountain peak, by burning him. So Hiranyakashipu tried so many means, and in the face of it all, this 5-year-old boy, Prahlad, remained fearless. Not only was he fearless, he was also ecstatic in his, fearless, that's negative, isn't it? But then he was also, in a positive way, he was ecstatic in his practice of bhakti. The descriptions are there in the Bhagavatam, 7th canto. He would sing, he would dance, his hair would stand on end. He would be thrilled and elated in experiencing Krishna by remembering him, by singing his holy names. So let's pause here then for some sadhana notes as we reflect on this second topic, the effects of knowing or experiencing God. And that is to recognize that knowing Krishna is not just manifest in intellectual prowess, but it's the character, the moving of the heart. The symptoms are there: tolerance, fear, peacefulness, happiness, equipoise, friendship towards others. There's a very nice verse. I traveled with Indrajuna Maharaj as his assistant for 18 years. And in many, many classes, Indrajuna Maharaj would repeat the same verse. And I was 15, so 15 to, for 18 years, from age 15. Sometimes I'll think, why does he repeat this verse all the time? But in more recent times, I've been so much relishing and appreciating this verse. It describes the qualities of the bhakta. It's from the 3rd canto of the Bhagavatam. Titikshava kurunika suhrida sarvadehinam ajata kshatrava shanta sadava sadubhushana. The symptoms of a devotee are that the devotee is tolerant and merciful and friendly to all living beings, compassionate to all living beings. They have no enemies. They are peaceful. They abide in the Shastra, in the scriptures, like the Bhagavatam. And their characteristics are sublime. Sadhava sadhu bhushana. The external symptoms of the bhakta are these: peace, happiness, joyfulness, equipoise, compassion. But that's not all of it. If we go back to the verse that we are discussing today, Vasudeva becomes fearless on beholding. His heart shifts from fear to fearlessness on beholding and experiencing God, his son, as Purusha Param. But then something else happens. What else? What is the other effect? He becomes inspired to serve. He becomes impelled to engage in devotional service. And they are, this is described in the verse with words such as natanga, nata anga. So anga means body. His body bends, he bows before the Lord. And then there's another phrase in the verse that says kritanjali. Anjali is this: when we fold our hands, we say namaste, kritanjali. So he bows and he folds his hands. And stuti, astut. Stuti means to offer praises. He bows, he folds his hands, and he offers praises. He offers prayers. And you're going to be discussing those prayers in future classes. But what we see here is one of the angas of bhakti, that is vandanam, to offer prayers, to offer obeisances, to offer the self to the divine, to the Supreme Lord in devotion. So this is the real effect of knowing God. So knowing God is not just intellectual, but it is a moving of the heart. It is expressed in character, peacefulness, tolerance, compassion, joyfulness, and it is expressed as a desire to serve. Vasudeva has beheld the Supreme Lord and he wants to serve. He's naturally impelled to do this. It's not an intellectual, cognitive, what should I do now? No, naturally his heart just pushes him. The heart moves him to serve, to fold his hands, to bow his head, to offer praises. When our Shastras, our scriptures, they give other examples. When Daruka, Krishna's charioteer, beheld Krishna, there's a description that he was inspired to fan him. And this service, this devotional service that he was performing gave him such bliss, such joy, that he cried tears of ecstasy. And then because the tears were welling up in his eyes, he couldn't see Krishna anymore. And so he cursed the ecstasy. I was like, hey, this ecstasy is a hindrance to my service. There's another description of a king, also in the Bhagavatam. His name was Bahulashva. Krishna, he traveled from Dwarka to another city called Mithila. And when he arrived, he was greeted by the king of the city. His name was Bahulashva. And when Bahulashva beheld Krishna, his heart moved him to serve. And he wanted to serve by offering 100 obeisances. Is that enough? No, it's not enough, but that's a start. So he determined for himself. He was inspired. Let me offer 100 obeisances to Krishna. But after one obeisance, he became stunned in ecstasy. And so he was unable to rise, and so he lamented that the ecstasy had become a hindrance to his ability to serve. When the gopis the cowherd maidens of Vrindavan, the cowherd girls of Vrindavan, heard Krishna's flute song, his flute melody, they became inspired to serve, and they stopped whatever they were doing. And they rushed to join Krishna by the Yamuna River, to serve him by dancing with him, by pleasing him with their company. And so true knowledge of Krishna then will inspire this desire to serve Krishna. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he would experience Krishna in his name, and he would serve Krishna by singing this name and dancing and propagating, sharing this name, sharing this practice with others, traveling from village to village across India. And he was criticized by some sannyasis of Varanasi. Varanasi, even today, is a seat of Hindu learning. They criticized him. They said, "You're a sannyasi. You should study Vedanta." So Vedanta teaches the difference between the body and the self. It teaches the Aham Brahmasmi, I'm soul, I'm not the body. And so that teaching can lead to a detachment. So they thought it's important for a sannyasi to really study Vedanta and become detached from the world. But they saw Chaitanya fully immersed in the world by singing and dancing with people and expressing this love and this joy with the multitudes. So they criticized him. And eventually there was a meeting. Chaitanya was invited to somebody's home, and the host had also invited the Mayavadi, the sannyasis of Benares. And so they invited Lord Chaitanya to sit with them, and they asked him, "Why do you sing and dance and not, rather than just study Vedanta, as a sannyasi ought to do?" And Lord Chaitanya told them that the teaching of Vedanta is to serve Krishna through bhakti. So when you study Vedanta, the conclusion is Vedanta, the conclusion of the Vedanta is to love God. And that love is expressed as service. Shravanam, Kirtanam, to hear of Krishna, to glorify Krishna, to remember Krishna. And so what I do is Vedanta. And so we see here, Vasudeva, he has this vit, this prabhava vit, this knowledge of Krishna's greatness, knowledge of Krishna's influence, and he's inspired to serve. And he's serving by one of the angas of bhakti, that is to offer prayer, to offer praises. He's bowed his head, he's offered his hands in Anjali, and he's going to offer praises to Krishna. Other angas of bhakti are described by Prahlad Maharaj and by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, to serve devotees, to hear the Bhagavatam as we're doing now, to engage in kirtan, to serve the deity in the temple, to make pilgrimage to the holy place like the temple, or places like Vrindavan. And so let's conclude then. Today we've been discussing Krishna's appearance before Vasudeva in the prison cell. And when he beholds this child and realizes this is God, the Param Purusha, the Supreme Person, he is inspired. Today we've been discussing his inspiration under 4 categories. One was the effects of knowledge of Krishna. And one effect is that ignorance goes away. And ignorance is symptomized by fear. Fear and doubt. Without knowledge of Krishna, there is darkness. So we seek out, but that seeking cannot, so we cannot arrive at the conclusion by our own efforts. It is revealed as grace. We had that in the story of Brahma. A second topic was that knowledge of Krishna is to experience Krishna. It's not just intellectual. It is to behold the glory of God and to for the heart to be moved. When we practice sadhana for Krishna's pleasure, we experience Krishna in our reading, in our discussing, in our chanting. And when we have that experience, we don't need intellectual proofs anymore. The intellectual proofs become lesser to the experience of God, of God's grace, of God's glory, of that wonder. And so we discuss some of these effects as our third topic: peacefulness, compassion, kindness, tolerance. These are natural effects in the character of somebody who's been moved by knowledge of God, by beholding God and by experiencing God. That will be exhibited in that person's character. A joyfulness, a peacefulness, a compassion. And then finally, our fourth topic was that this knowledge will inspire service. We'll be inspired to engage in seva. We'll be inspired to serve. And that is the true effect of knowledge of Krishna, beholding Krishna. So I'll conclude here. Any questions or comments or reflections are most welcome.
Adipusha Prabhu, you wanted to say something? You're muted.
Yeah.
Are you waiting for them to take care of the Akashvani?
So Jeff also has a hand raised.
Wow, Prabhu, fantastic class. So sweet. Your spiritual master is empowering you. And perfect, everything perfect. We can only say, how can we serve you? And I was imagining this is like a pastime where Krishna appears and devotee, in this case, Vasudeva sees Krishna. And there's a couple of other ones, like when Dhruva sees Krishna. And meditating on that, the impression I have is that, he says that thing, I was looking for broken glass and I found the precious jewel. And my impression was that when he saw Krishna, when you look at a person, you can tell what they think of you, Even a dog can tell if you're threatened by them or you're welcoming them. It's a subliminal language of the heart. And my impression was that Dhruva saw Krishna looking at him with affection. And he said, Krishna was here all the time and he loves me. We can think of in a wonderful way about the power of the Lord and the beauty of the Lord and the strength of the Lord and the brilliant intelligence of the Lord. But one thing that comes across in that verse from the Bhagavad Gita about how the devotee becomes peaceful is thinking that Krishna is in control. Things aren't just going on with chaos, and that he's my friend. If he's in control, but he's not my friend, what's the use? Right. Or he's my friend and he's not in control, what's the use? And then that we're supposed to do what he likes, When we get to that point where we want to please Krishna, we're not just making him an order supplier. Those three components are there. And the heart opens and we relax. And there's no more lack of peacefulness, As a matter of fact, there's the ecstasy. Anyway, fantastic class. All glories to Prabhupada.
Jai, thank you so very much.
Thank you so much for the wonderful class. I
was moved by your reflections and your realizations on on Dhruva Maharaj, and also the Bhaktaram Yagyatapasam verse as well. Obviously, you've meditated on that verse a lot. I loved your summary. Thank you so much. And thank you for your encouragement.
Bhima Prabhu.
Beamer.
Yes, Haribo. Haribo. Can you hear me?
Yes, we hear
All
you.
right, Prahlad Maharaj. Very wonderful class. I like how you break things down, and I'd like to refer back to the beginning of your class when you mentioned tapa, and you broke it down into 2 syllables, tapa. Could you reiterate what those 2 syllables mean again? Besides just austerity, we normally just say tapa means austerity. But what you broke it down differently. What was that?
Yeah, thank you for that, Bhim Prabhu. So when we read our Acharya's commentaries, they say bhakti actually, but it's that he's to go inwardly to meditate on Krishna. I didn't break it down further. So tapa literally means to penance or austerity as a Sanskrit word. And he heard those 2 syllables as an instruction to go inwardly and to meditate on Krishna. And he was given guidance.
My question is that austerity often is an external action. And I remembered in my day when I was a young bhakta in the 80s, tapa meant a sacrifice and suffering and long suffering, which is a virtue, I guess. And doing these external actions where we were never much, as in other disciplines, other religions, the monastic pursuit, the mystic pursuit. And I don't mean mystic yoga as in Paramatma. I mean mystic as in contemplation, reflection, introspection, silence, and stillness, which is not much mentioned within our movement. It is actually kind of like, why are you sitting still? You need to do activity. Or why are you sitting still long enough to contemplate? So when you said tapa means going within, I don't remember that much being discussed. It was always external. Do this, do that. So could you elaborate on either why we don't, or maybe I missed it?
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for that. So when I read the Sanskrit around those verses, it says that he engaged in bhakti yoga. So he received the instruction to engage in tapa, and that he meditated for 1,000 celestial years or something that some very, very vast expanse of time. And then the further verses state that he engaged in bhakti yoga. And so bhakti yoga has different expressions. It could be, as you were saying or implying, remembrance. So an internal practice of remembrance. And I would say, most important, to your point, it is internal. It has an external, it may have an external expression as chanting and physically serving, as in cleaning a temple with our hands, or walking to a pilgrimage place with our feet, as Ambarish Maharaj is said to have done, or looking upon the deity. So there are different ways that we engage our senses in service, but it's important also that we engage our internal senses as we perform these activities. And the internal senses are the inner ear and the inner eye. The inner ear, that when we chant and we hear the name, we're not just hearing sound, but we consciously hear the name. When we smell the fragrance of the incense of the flower that's offered, we consciously also smell with our inner sense capacity of smelling the fragrance and appreciating. And when we see the deity and we come out of the temple room and say, what color were the deities wearing today? We actually were able to remember because we have seen also with our inner eye and appreciated, here is Krishna. And we have made a conscious effort to behold Krishna. So the external practices of bhakti, they should also be accompanied by an internal practice as well. And at a certain stage, the external can even fall away, where the practice can be wholly internal. And that is what the most advanced devotees do, where they engage in Lila Smarna. They're remembering the pastimes and they're serving internally. But then they go from the internal to enter the eternal pastimes of Krishna in Vrindavan Dham. But yeah, for us, the external engagement is very practical and helpful. So it's that we can engage all of our senses in service. And that at a deeper level, we can do this internally as well as we engage in those external activities. And then in doing that, we're building our, this is getting esoteric, but we're building our spiritual bodies, in fact, our spiritual senses, our spiritual mind, such that when the material body itself dissolves, then there is a spiritual body that has been created, a spiritual form and identity that has been realized through the internal practice. So it's very much part of our tradition, Bhima Prabhuji, and it's a deeper, much higher level, advanced stage of practice, but it's definitely important and needs to be there. Even at a neophyte stage, we can try to be attentive with our internal consciousness and conscious awareness as we engage in the practices of bhakti.
That was just a wonderful answer. So I will take from it, just so that I can always remember what you just said, is that we go from the external and then we mix the internal with the external. So we go from external to internal to eternal.
Yeah, that's a great summary.
Yeah, I love that. That's great. Thank you very much, Prabhu.
My pleasure. Thank you. Thank you for bringing out those nuances.
Angel?
Last word here.
For some of us, this concept is rather simple. Trying to just sit and do japa brings out this nature of thinking this external to go internal. It's not always an advanced thing. For some of us, it's very hard to do this still. So
yeah,
it's there if you look.
Yeah.
I had also wanted to say that I felt that this whole lovely lecture that you were able to offer us, thank you, could have been done to the Jewish story of being David in the lion's den, of this having this fear and then having this great release of just knowing that things are going to be okay, that we're going to be able to get out of that lion's den. So finding this repetition of message in different stories. I'm very new to these stories here, so it helps. It's a beautiful sensation to feel again. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you for that, Angel. And yeah, that's a nice reflection over this Passover period, right? To make that link that you've made there. Well done.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Prahlad Prabhu, for bringing up all these wonderful sensations to us. I personally experienced that Krishna is there for me. He will back me up. He'll bail me out. He'll pull me out of the fire. And this is a highlight of our day, to hear Srimad Bhagavatam. Prahlad Prabhu, thank you very much. Beautiful session, beautiful Q&A. You handled the questions so nicely. You satisfied Bhima Prabhu.
Thank you, Anand Bihari Prabhu. Thank you all for the honor to meet you and to share with you. It's a pleasure and an honor.
Okay. Shri Prahlad Prabhu ki jai. Shrimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Indradyumna Swami Maharaj ki jai. Devotees attending class regularly ki jai. And irregularly also ki jai. Thank you all very much. Good to see you every day.
There's the conch shell.
Are we getting darshan? They're teasing us. Okay. All right. Anyways, thank you very much. Have a wonderful day, everybody. Thanks for keeping your cameras on. We love you all. Henry Prabhu, Angel, Hemangi, I'm seeing you. Jamuna Jai is here. Suzanne. Who else? Bhima Prabhu, of course. Akiko-chan. Hare Krishna, Akiko-chan. Akiko-chan is beautiful. She's either beautifying herself or beautifying Krishna. That's the only... Yes, Krishna, Krishna. Okay. Jason Prabhu, Angelika, Arjuna Prabhu, Hare Krishna, Henry Prabhu, Yogeshwari. Yogeshwari, turn on your camera. We want to see you. We don't know who you are. This movement is radical personalism. Radical personalism. Gail, Hare Krishna, Bhadra Yamuna. Welcome to our humble assembly here. Bhadra Yamuna, Hare Krishna. Isabel, Spirit Soul, Hare Krishna. Okay. Have a beautiful day. Hare Bol.